Welcome, everyone. I'm Ines Benson. I'm head of marketing here at Synapse. We are a recruiting company based in the US. We leverage AI to hire the best people across the globe. And soon we'll have our 10-year anniversary. So that's 10 years helping startups hire the best talent all around the globe. Today, I'm very excited because we have two great guests. Oren Singer from Sparrow was supposed to join us today, but unfortunately, he got a bug, so we wish him a swift recovery. And saving the day in his place, today we have Rafael Arizaga. He's a great friend of mine. Thank you, Rafa, for always being there for the entrepreneur community. Rafa is the CEO and co-founder of YEPA. YEPA is a casual mobile gaming social network to play against your friends. He is based in Mexico, but spends a ton of time in Silicon Valley too. He's also a UX UI consultant for TopTal, where the best freelance talents in the world can be found. So he knows a lot. Thank you, Rafa, for being here. And Abraham López, CEO and co-founder of Correcto, a company very close to my heart because I love what they do. I love their mission. I love what they do. Correcto has the vision to develop AI in Spanish, and they currently have a plugin that can help Spanish speakers improve their writing. Yes, much like Grammarly in Spanish. And they are also developing some new technology with AI, which is very exciting, also in Spanish, which is a great mission because we don't have that much AI in Spanish. So thank you, Abraham. And he has spent many years in London, but he's originally from Madrid, Spain. So the dynamic for today will be as follows. I will ask each of you a question. If the other person wants to, continue with that answer, or if you have something to say, of course, feel free to jump in. And some questions will be directed at both, so whoever wants can jump right in. So without further ado, I will drink a little bit of water because I spoke very fast because I'm nervous. And let's go. So Abraham, since you're already laughing, how did you first start with your company and what is it about in your own words?
So we started Correcto around 2 years ago. Both one of the founders and myself, we shared the problem that we had been living outside of a Spanish-speaking country for a long time. And at the same time, we were struggling to actually communicate efficiently in our mother tongue language, in this case, the Spanish. And finally, we were power users of Grammarly, big fans of the platform. And we're like, wait, how come the platform of Grammarly isn't existent in other languages, and particularly in Spanish, which has nearly 600 million speakers? And that's what kind of like gave us the inspiration to start our company, and we've been at the mission since then.
Awesome. That's great and very inspiring. Rafa, how did you first get the idea to start YEPA? How did it start?
It was a long time ago. I'm pretty old. But I used to have an agency. I had a development agency here in Mexico. We used to do a lot of websites, apps, and games for marketing agency, advertising agencies, and small, medium, and large companies in Mexico. To everybody, we used to do a lot of web development. And some of the most successful projects there in the agency were games. So we tried to do a product based on games. We started YEPA being like an advert gaming product for B2B companies, mostly restaurants and small businesses. We went through an acceleration program in Silicon Valley, and then we pivoted to become like a B2C, more oriented into gaming.
Awesome. So we have one very driven by money, following the money where the market is, and the other one following a pain point that he personally have. I love how different your origin stories are. Personally, I have very little experience monetizing a B2C business model. Did any of you have any previous experience with a B2C business model? Was there a realization that you had going down the rabbit hole of a B2C business?
Yeah, for me, B2C is my favorite for a lot because I hate selling to big companies. It's like, and I did it a lot. As I said, YEPA started as a B2B. And it's very slow. You need to have a lot of relationships, and you need to, I don't know, you always like feel like you owe something to the big company. They always have this power against you because they have the leverage. And in B2C, it's a very different game. It's more about volume, and it's hard. B2C is hard. But if you got it well, it's great because every user care about the company and the branding, and they like you doing service for them. So it's great to have a community, and I don't know, it's just more fun for me.
I love that you mentioned the branding because that is very important for a B2C company, right? And maybe, well, we're starting to see more B2B companies focusing on branding, but it is historically it has been something very B2C oriented. I have the sweatshirt of YEPA here. It's a very good brand, a very cool brand. What was something that you had very present when building that brand? What was like the feelings that you wanted to evoke in your clients?
Mostly fun. That's the whole theme of the branding and the product. We call ourselves the fun platform or the fun app. So fun is the most important part of it. So the main reference of the YEPA logo is a mouth in a form of a smile. So even the form of the logo is a conveys fun, and the character that we have, the mascot, is this player, like a character based on old school games, like arcade games. It's like the reference is like a pixel, but it's still in the form of a mouth, or that's where it came from. So everything's around fun. So we started looking for other brands that are fun. A lot of the references that we used in the past is Nintendo, it's Coca-Cola, it's Netflix, brands that helps you to have fun in real world. So that's a little bit on how the branding was conformed.
Well, great job. You nailed it. What about you, Abraham? I realize, Abraham, that I'm saying your name so different every time that I say it because I'm pronouncing like Spanish and English and going back and forth. So I apologize for butchering your name.
No worries.
What is an insight that you can share with us today? Like, what was the biggest struggle of getting traction for Correcto?
I think I completely agree with Rafa in the sense that the consumer angle is the most fun area, but also the most challenging one. A very simple example of how to describe the challenges of the B2C is retention metrics aren't the same as when you sell to enterprise. So that's something that is really, really challenging because you need to really understand what's the value proposition you're offering, and if that value proposition works for all the audiences that you're targeting through channels. And breaking that down is a huge mission. It's a huge mission. It's a massive project. You really have to understand not necessarily why people are using your platform. That's a big part of it, but how to acquire the right people through different channels is increasingly difficult in today's world. I think that's one of the main things. And additionally to that, other than the retention metrics, I think is kind of the capacity to distribute yourself everywhere. So distribution is essentially the main objective when you're building a B2C company. It's usually very complicated because you need to build a repeatable cycle that doesn't depend on bringing, let's say, wood to the fire from a marketing perspective. So you have a limited and finite amount of money to kind of acquire customers. You have pretty much the infinite amount of customers that can be acquired. The way in which you can bridge the gap between these two aspects is usually very complicated because founders from venture-backed companies like us, we are, wow, this is super cool. You can put wood into the fire, you can grow, you can spend money in different channels. And then you realize that this is something that's unsustainable. Finding organic growth loops is also fascinating, but really complicated.
I can imagine. And do you have a freemium subscription model? How does it work?
Right. So we have a freemium subscription model oriented towards the consumer. Essentially, what we want to do is create a frictionless process in order to create that sign up. For us right now, we depend on two main KPIs. One of them is new users, and the other one is net retention of users. In order to increase the first one, we're going to need a very, let's say, seamless, easy, frictionless sign-up process. And that's part of the cycle. And then second to that is going to be, how are you going to retain that user? How are you going to make it active? How is that user really going to feel a dependency on your product? So going back to your question, I think it's really complicated. It's something that every consumer product has to constantly evolve and educate themselves on it, because user trends really change. We've seen it with Instagram, we've seen it with Netflix, we've seen it with Spotify. Spotify started as a music app. Now they do podcasts, they do AI converted into music, and we'll probably see a transition towards, who knows, other media sectors in the future. And that's honestly like really fun, no? Like I cannot agree more with Rafa. B2C is fascinating, but it's honestly a science.
I think B2C is so much harder than B2B, because when you have B2B, you have these big whales that you can go after, even if they take a lot of time. It's like you get one or two and you're kind of like saved. But for B2C, it's like kind of trying to control like waves, because there's so many factors to consider.
Yeah, I heard this phrase one time about at a micro level, humans are very unpredictable, but at a macro level, humans are very predictable. So that's for me, B2C, like predicting and based on data and based on psychology and neuroscience, trying to figure out what humans like and how to create the wow moment, engagement, create a fun experience, right?
For sure. I remember, Rafa, I might be cheating because this came from a previous conversation, but you told me once something like, in the gaming industry, 90% of the revenue comes from 10% of the players.
Yeah,
Was
it's
it like
actually,
that?
it's like 95, 97, something like, yeah. And but what's the context about is that a question, or is just like
I was getting to it. No, that it is really interesting, because at the end of the day, you guys, when you have a B2C company, you have to appeal to the 100% of your user base. But I can imagine that most of the features are going to be focused on these 3 or 5% of users who actually pay. I hear that in a freemium model, 10% is a really good number, but in gaming it's actually a lot less. So you have these 5% of users who are actually supporting the platform for the other 95%.
The thing with the gaming industry is like it has a lot of vicious cycles. Like yeah, that's true. The whales are maintaining the whole industry, but that's actually what we don't want to go after. Like because as a company, the long term and the big growth is not in that 2%. Is, like you said, is in, I call it in the long tail, right? Like where is the maybe there is a segment of the industry that right now is not putting money into gaming, but if they have enough value, they can convert. But because the industry is optimized to monetize with the whales, then they don't care about the long tail. So that's where we are trying to figure out ways to increase or value so they can pay. And for us, is that's the fun part.
Do you see these too, Abraham? Is this the same way for you? If you feel comfortable disclosing like the percentage of people that pay versus the percentage of people that use the platform?
I think that's something we still have to crack down. And that's hence why we have that freemium product. Going back to your previous question, in order to crack the code for us is really understanding usage numbers. So we try to sign up the user, see how much they use the platform, and eventually have that transition towards a premium user. I think the challenge there is kind of coordinating marketing analytics with product analytics and making sure that goes flawlessly together. For us, that's a challenge. That's a challenge right now. In fact, where we want to improve the most is getting those daily active users into converting into that funnel of paid users. And this is why I understand why other companies with a similar business model like ours also offer their services to the business, because it brings protection in the monetization aspect. And as the company grows, it is able to kind of like do B2C and B2B simultaneously. B2B particularly in a bottoms-up approach, from where people are really using the platform across the organization, and then that gets sent to management. And therefore, there's a larger opportunity for revenue recognition in the future. We're still trying to figure out what's the right way to do about monetizing the B2C. The easiest way to respond to this question is volume, and obviously that's what everyone wants, right? So yeah, you have 10 million users, you convert 1%, you convert 0.5% of that, and you're obviously doing 15 million ARR, 20 million ARR. It's really complicated to get there, but I think we can get there. In Correcto, we will get there for sure.
For sure. I love how you talk about these metrics or this B2C jargon like it's common knowledge, and it's really not. I can tell, not being in a B2C environment, that you already have so much knowledge in the B2C revenue model that it's amazing. It's completely different from B2B. And personally, I have always been a very data-oriented marketer. And I've always tried to analyze the data. And, when you go to an accelerator or a startup accelerator, it's all about the KPIs and what are you going to measure and show that you improved. And as I transitioned from a startup, like my own startup, to larger companies, I kind of shifted away from that. I tried to stay there for a long time. And now I can see, because I worked at a larger company, I can see I learned there the value of brand. And sometimes it's very hard to pinpoint which action led to a purchase. And it's not sometimes a single action. It's like a lot of touch points that you had to do with your clients. So my next question goes to Rafa, already kind of answered it, but as to brand. Are there any brand efforts? What were you thinking when you created the brand? What was kind of the brief? What did you want your users to feel when they encountered with Correcto? And sort of, if we can have a glimpse into the vision behind it.
This is a question for me, right?
For you. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So the brand we want to create is a brand of quality. So essentially what we want to kind of bring to the user is hey, if you use Correcto, you really care about the quality in which you write your emails, your texts, that you are a person that is very understanding of the kind of requirements that a high professional or high, let's say, performance person is required to have all throughout their career, in every interaction, in every communication piece. That's what we're trying to portray to the consumer. We want consumers to look at Correcto as a stamp of quality that they can use as kind of like a piece of honor to use a platform that really improves their writing. Other than this, other sectors of the brand that we're trying to grow is probably AI for Spanish. So we are doubling down a lot in research. We're really investing into building knowledge for the AI in Spanish, which is something that has been undiscovered, untouched right now. And therefore, understanding the huge FOMO there is for AI right now in the world and how little this has been explored in the Spanish language, we're trying to leverage our position in the market by, hey, being a really good writing tool that uses AI for, and particularly and specifically for Spanish writers. And I think by combining the AI approach that requires kind of like very good knowledge of a particular industry that's actually hard to understand, combined with the quality badge that we try to implement into every user, I think the kind of brand that we're trying to build is an intellectual, well-renowned brand that people are proud of. That's the objective. And we're very early in the process, I'd say, but I think we can get there as well.
I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. I think you've done really amazing, and hats off to you. Also, to me, it's really heartwarming to hear your vision because it resonates so much with so much of what I believe in. So really, congratulations. You have to continue to do it. And so comes a question that I didn't plan and I didn't prepare you for, so my apologies for that. But there's two approaches to language and how we're supposed to talk. One is descriptive, that is like, language changes 10 to 15% a year, and people are going to continue the way they talk. Boomers speak different to millennials and to Gen Z. And there is another approach to language that is restrictive, that is that language should be dead. And, we should all speak in that way, and we should, strive to keep the language in the same way. So I'd love to hear your approach on this and Correcto's approach. What do you think?
I think personally, what we think in our company is that language is an art, and you need to master it. So when you are a good painter, you master the art of painting. When you are a great athlete, you master the art of being an athlete or doing sport. Being able to communicate is a very specific attribute that not everyone knows how to do. A very simple example is public speaking. I think everyone can relate to this. There's people who know incredibly well how to direct themselves towards an audience. There's people who just aren't good at it. And surprisingly, the same happens with written communication. So we actually disagree a little bit with that kind of trend there is of people not really believing in communication as a vital aspect of maybe the professional industry, the academic industry, or pretty much everything that has to do with social interactions. We believe in improving this and helping people get better at it and giving people a tool to be confident articulating their thoughts. At the end of the day, democratizing, right? I think the democratizing is a very buzzy word, particularly in the startup industry, but it really applies to what we're building. So I really hope we continue to have that impact we're having in our users, and that this only grows, because it will be a pity that communication isn't well regarded anymore in the future.
Love that. And we have a question in the chat that I think is amazing. Do you consider excellent written communication skills to be a hard requirement when hiring people at Correcto?
I love that. I love that question. We don't hire anyone who doesn't know how to properly communicate, because we believe in what we build, and we need to sell what we are. If we have someone in the organization that doesn't really align with what we're selling, I don't think there's a fit. I'm going to give you a very similar example. If you're a soccer club, would you hire someone who doesn't know how to play soccer? I think that's a little bit how we approach this particular dilemma.
Hey, tough environment. A typo could cost your job. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. With that being said, we understand why this happens, and we are there to support it. And it's something we don't disregard. It's not something that we disregard or we criticize. It's the opposite. But every company has their guidelines when hiring.
Of course, of course. So we move on to the next questions. Next question, sorry. Where have you launched and where are you planning to expand? And how did you choose those markets? This one is for you, Abraham.
So currently we have launched in Spain and the whole Latin America. Currently we are identifying metrics to understand which markets are particularly interesting for us. Latin America by far has exceeded our expectations, as it's such an incredible continent when it comes to digital products. In fact, I reflect on this a lot, on why particularly this market. I actually listened to a podcast the other day from Marcelo Claure. He's a very well-renowned businessman in Latin America, early investor in Uber. And I was shocked with one of the sentences he said, right? That when he did his first investment into Uber, they were keeping a secret that 3 of their biggest markets were in Latin America. So that's Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, and Ciudad de México. And adding to this point is the particular ability that the Latin American community has to adapt technological products. And we've seen very simple examples like Uber is an example, Netflix is an example, WhatsApp is an incredible example. So we've transitioned to leave Europe behind and focus a little bit more into Latin America. And back to the question of where we see ourselves, like what's the next step for us, is obviously understanding the data, understanding where we should double down, but also the US, the Spanish-speaking community in the US is something that really resonates with us, especially because the founders of this company were living in an English-speaking country when we started Correcto. So we're intrigued by how that market will react to this product. But I think there's a huge potential there, not only because of the Spanish speakers that are living in the US, but also the education ingredient of English native speakers that are learning a language like their Spanish and they just want to polish their writing.
Awesome. Amazing. So next step, the US.
We hope so.
Safe landing. Rafa, you've been to Silicon Valley too, and you are based in Guadalajara, Mexico. Can you give us some insights on the relationship between these two places?
Yeah, they used to say that Guadalajara is the Silicon Valley of Mexico. And I used to believe that, but I'm not sure about that anymore. Because once you are in Silicon Valley, you realize that it's a huge difference in terms of opportunities, in terms of talent, in terms of the amount of knowledge like bouncing around everywhere. Like the culture in Silicon Valley is very different, and the biggest funds in the world are there, and there's where the money is. So you have to be there if you want to be like the elite athlete in the startup world. But I will say that in Mexico, we have a long way to go. But there are a lot of opportunities to grow. Like I think there's a lot of opportunities to start companies and start products here in Mexico, because there are a lot of room to explore, to innovate. And I will say to all Latin America will be the same. Like there are a lot of opportunities that the big companies in US haven't like launched here in Mexico. So there are space to have your own products here and iterate. But definitely we don't have the amount of money that maybe you would ideally want, but you need to be more scrappy. But that also it's one of the main differences between Latin America and the US, that we are very scrappy people, and we know how to do more with less. So I think those are the main differences.
And you received some funding for your startup. How does it compare to the rounds, for example, from Silicon Valley?
Our case is very particular because we are Mexican startups. We went through a group of startups through Valero, which is an investor from Mexico. Valero is an investor, and then the acceleration program was GSB Labs. And the thing there is that, yes, we were in Silicon Valley and our companies were there, but the investors were from Mexico. So we got valuations from us being in Silicon Valley, which is very different. Like a valuation from a Silicon Valley company starts at $1 million. In Mexico, it starts like 1 million, 2 million pesos, which is like a fraction of it. So that's a huge difference when you are trying to raise money in Mexico, because you start with a big valuation in Silicon Valley, and investors from Mexico don't want to funding to do the same valuation that you had in Silicon Valley. So you need to get investors from Silicon Valley. But if you are in Mexico, they don't trust you as well as you will be living there, because they want to see you there. So I don't know. Investing, I think, is a lot of related to relationships. So you need to meet your investors. They need to see you grow. They need to see you work hard in your startup. That's how you can, they recommend you to other investors. So yeah, I will say that if you want to raise money, you need to create relationships. And of course, you need to know which game do you want to play, the one in Latin America or the one in US, which is different.
That's a great insight. And I remember us discussing a lot about traction also. That is something that investors in Latin America ask for a lot. And maybe in Silicon Valley, they don't ask for as much. You can start a company with an idea and you can get really good funding for it in the US. Unlike in Latin America, that you have to have already a lot of traction and to prove a lot of other things.
Yeah, I think that the difference is that they don't trust you. So they ask for more. But yeah, that's true. That's true.
Could be. Or they have more to lose. We can spin it to be nicer. And we have breaking news here today, because only 2 days ago, Correcto announced that they recently raised a very big round of funding that is almost $7 million, right, Abraham?
Absolutely, yes. We are very happy to have raised this money. It brings us into a lot of responsibility at the end of the day. So I think I completely agree with everything Rafa mentioned. The way in which investors in the US think is very different to how Latin American investors think. And in fact, that's something that you can relate a lot with Europe. European investors are also looking for that kind of traction, which makes it very hard to bootstrap towards if you want to grow fast, particularly a consumer-oriented company. For us, the funding comes, as mentioned, with a huge amount of responsibility. I think we have very big goals that we need to achieve. But the fact that they've invested this amount makes us very positive about the potential that we have. So it's not only us that's seeing that potential, people around the world are also seeing that potential. And I think that's an important motivator to get closer to the mission. And at the end of the day, the mission is to work on distribution. So be in every corner of Latin America. And this is the kind of money that you need to get there.
Well, congratulations. That's huge. Wish you the best in all the future endeavors of your company. And now, we're doing always like the good part and then the bad part, the good part, the bad part. And when you grow that much, when you raise that much money, I'm guessing that investors are expecting some things to remain the same, but they're expecting some things to change. And some of the pains that we see that we work with being a hiring company is that companies that raise a lot of funding suddenly have this pain of having to hire a lot of people in a very short period of time. So here I have two questions, and one of them is, have you ever had one team member make or break a project at Correcto? And what is the most common trait among successful people at Correcto?
So far, I wouldn't say anyone's broken a project yet. Fortunately, I think we always have to keep our eyes wide open to see that everyone fits. And it's an important concept, because one thing is fitting in when you are hired in that particular moment, but are you able to evolve with how the company is progressing? That's the main aspect for us. And are you going to be able to evolve and adapt when the company is 3 times bigger, 10 times bigger? That's something that we ask ourselves every single day. Second to your second part of the question, it goes around what's the particular trait we have found to be the most successful in Correcto.
Besides good spelling?
I think it's hunger, if I'm honest, motivation, being able to want to go that extra mile. This comes from someone who has no work experience. So I started Correcto as a very young person. Most of the team is very young, and I've seen this across particular individuals in the firm, people who have maybe just graduated and this is their second job, people who maybe haven't even finished their degree, but they are so hungry and so they have such big goals, and they understand that Correcto is a great platform to reach those goals. That's the perfect kind of employee. That's the perfect, because you are allowing them through your platform to get to their goals, and it's a reciprocal kind of relationship because their goals are aligned with your goals and everyone wins. What doesn't work is when someone has big goals but doesn't work for them, and that's the complete opposite. So you have to be very aware of these people when you're hiring. I think that's the most dangerous kind of personality trait that you can hire.
So not only they have to talk the talk, they have to walk the walk.
Yes.
Or something like that goes the saying, right? I don't. Now you made me doubt.
I agree. No, I couldn't agree more, Ines.
Okay. Rafa, maybe here you can give us a little bit of insights more on the other side, like working at TopTal. What insights can you give us to improve the hiring experience of a company? Like, you're on the other side, you are on the receiving end also of, companies wanting to hire top talent. They come to this company to find it because they have these vouched professionals that they know that they're going to be able to, they have the experience building these big successful projects. So having been there, having worked with people from all over the world in such different projects, what is your takeaway for a good hiring process?
That's a hard question. Because, for example, I did the recruitment process in TopTal as a designer. And as a designer, it's very particular because it's very subjective. It's like very visual, and you need to have this as, if you are recruiting designers, you need to be a designer. I know TopTal hires designers to recruit designers. So that's an important part of the recruiting process they have. And they ask you to do free work for them as a test. So they give you a project, and then you can showcase your work, and that's how they can measure your abilities, right? So, and I like that approach as well. And I sometimes do it myself when I'm hiring, like trying to test somebody first before jumping in. So that's one part. And then there is this cultural then a match, right? Like sometimes people from other places don't have your same like work ethics or your same like culture. So you need to be aware of that, like taking care of how do you communicate with stakeholders, how do you present your work. All of those aspects are important. That from the top talent perspective is part of the interview process as well. But yeah, I think that's the main part, like testing a little bit of your skill set, having other professionals in the same area to filter the professionals, and then just checking the communication and then other soft skills as well.
Awesome. For those of you who don't know, I met Rafa years ago in a networking event, and he has always been such a great supporter of other entrepreneurs and an advocate for the startup life. Abraham also came forward almost immediately when I asked in a group if anyone wanted to talk about their experience in the B2C sector. So my question for you guys now is, was there a time that you had an aha moment that you realized, like, okay, meeting these people has changed my life, or being in this environment or this ecosystem is built different? What is the startup ecosystem to you?
For me, it was Silicon Valley. Like because I've been in technology all my life, like since I was 17 years old, I was doing websites, and I had this agency for 12 years. But I used to have an idea on how was the startup world and technology and industry, but I was not even close from when I got there. Like, and I saw the competition around, like just being the best, and you need to come up with ideas that haven't been there before, and you need to showcase your work, and you need to differentiate yourself as an entrepreneur, and differentiate your startup and your team and your product. So yeah, I learned a lot when I was there, and the community in Silicon Valley is very open to help. So they want to they share their knowledge, and they share their relationships and everything. So that's part of how you can grow there.
Awesome. Abraham, what did you have an aha moment of the startup ecosystem that said, like, okay, this is different from what I'm used to?
Personally, my experience is that entrepreneurship community has a lot of faces. So it has the really nice face, smiley face of always being able to help. Something unique about the startup industry is that asking favors is something common, and that they don't have to be returned. And a particular example is I've asked for some introductions to people in another industry, particularly in finance. And then I've received messages like, hey, I introduced you to this person, like, you owe me something. It's like, wait, I don't owe you anything, no? That's what I thought. And in the startup industry, it's completely opposite, right? So we are all here to help each other. Obviously, there are caveats when you're a competitor. I mean, that's obviously natural in any environment. But in the startup industry, there's always that desire to help. And this is something we see it very often with not only founders, but all across the organization. There's particularly an immense ability and availability to be able to add value to each other. This is very different to other industries. And I think there's also something important to mention for this particular question is entrepreneurship has also a very different phase. It's a much more aggressive, a much more requiring, a much more intense phase, considering the kind of like vast opportunities there are to create wealth, and getting to those opportunities, realizing these opportunities require a lot of grit and effort from founders. There are particular segments of entrepreneurship that really facilitate aggressiveness when it comes to building and growing a company. So there's a caveat here that it's very pretty, and it is, and I agree, because there's a strong sense of meaning, and I strongly believe that entrepreneurs don't start their business for money, particularly in the technology industry. But stakeholders that are in the technology industry are aware of the vast opportunities to create wealth, and therefore they can create pressure or maybe lead to a less healthy industry or an uglier industry, if that's allowed to say.
Of course. It is allowed and encouraged. I think that we should all benefit from a more honest work environment. We spend too many hours at work to be like wearing a mask all the time. So really appreciate it. And my last question, and with this, I'll free you for today because I feel like I've had you here for a really long time. Thank you guys very much. And I've had a lot more questions, but we kind of dived into very different things that were very interesting. So I wanted to go down those roads. Many companies are mission driven, others are product driven, a few are user driven. And personally, I find that there's two kind of people in the world: those who look at someone doing something better and feel discouraged, and some who look at that and they feel inspired. I must admit that when I was an entrepreneur, I belonged in the first group. I used to be gutted every time I looked at someone doing something similar because I thought it would mean the end of my startup, which was absolutely not the case. But do you look at what your competitors do, and what is your current obsession?
Rafa, you want to kick off?
No.
No, very honest.
In my opinion, I like to join forces a lot. So when I see competitors, I usually talk with them and try to bring them to my company. Like, let's do something together. And why don't we join forces and let's do the same thing? Because if you're passionate about it, I am passionate about it. Maybe we can Zoom and have this certain synergy, right? So that's my view in terms of talking with competitors. I like to approach them, and I like to know their learnings and check their ideas, because definitely I think they will be valuable for me as well, right?
Of course.
I couldn't agree more with Rafa, and that's the best approach in which you can consider your competition. In fact, what Rafa just said demonstrates that Rafa is confident on his product, because if he wasn't confident about his company or product, he would be like, ooh, competitor, let me run away from this. Let me avoid this. Let me see what they're doing. Let me be sneaky about it, right? I think this is something that in my particular case, I've improved on. I used to be a little bit like that. Maybe I wasn't feeling that confident when we started the product, right? It's just natural because it takes time to build a fantastic product. And little by little, I'm training myself, teaching myself to be more open to speaking with competition, learning from them, and trying to ally forces, kind of like join forces. And at the end of the day, what you have to focus is on two things. One, am I adding value to the current users I have? And two, is the market big enough to share it with different competitors? if you are ticking these two boxes, there shouldn't be any issues. But but markets, I understand that some markets might be smaller, and therefore it's a challenging topic.
Amazing insights, guys. Thank you very much. And I see that we have a question here in the chat, so I don't want to dismiss it. What is the way to navigate people in LATAM that ask for a tip or shares to introduce you to people? What if they are a gatekeeper? I saw the contrary in San Francisco, but now it's a challenge in Mexico to connect.
That's true. But what I do usually is just to be very straightforward and just say that, like, hey, what are you trying to make money for this? Like, I will do it for free. And if you don't have a positive answer, then maybe you're not your person. Maybe you can find people that will help you and will be in that same page. But definitely it's something that in Latin America we need to start like helping or like teammates or friends to realize. And that's the way I do it. Like when I saw somebody like gatekeeping their ideas or their contacts, I just said, man, that's not the way you help the community to grow and Latin America to grow, right?
Yeah. For sure.
No, absolutely. I agree with Rafa. If this is the situation, move on to the next person. And I think the best approach to be is like, be honest. Look, like I have no connections in this particular industry. I'm new into this business. Be honest about it and be humble, and help should come by itself. And particularly back to this aspect, it's a pity that there's people who still think like that. I'm a firm believer that helping for free usually has a compounding effect in the future. You never know how that's going to return to you, and it's usually in a much more meaningful way that maybe a cut of a deal, a commission of a deal, whatever. So I think you have to align completely in terms of ethics with the people you work with. And if this is coming up, maybe it's not the right opportunity.
Loved it, guys. Okay. Thank you very, very much, both of you, for your time. For those of you who were able to join late, we're going to share the recording afterwards. If you have any hiring needs, please connect with me or anyone on the team at Synapse. We're here to help you grow your company and get the better team that money can buy. So thank you guys again very much for your time, for all your valuable insights. I'm sure that you've helped a lot of people today. And you are actually doing it. You are helping the community. You took time, you carved time out of your day to help other entrepreneurs and people in the ecosystem. So this is very valuable, and I hope you receive back all the help that you have shared. And congratulations, Abraham, on your new round. We wish you the best.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Ina. See you soon in Argentina.